I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't leave a note. I just sat at the kitchen table for a long moment, looked at the coffee mug my son-in-law had left in the sink, unwashed, like always, and stood up. That was it. That was the moment. 63 years old, and I was finally done. Let me go back a little. Not far. Just far enough so you understand how we got there. My daughter met him at a work conference in Denver. She called me that same weekend, voice bright in the way I hadn't heard in years. She'd been through a rough patch, a difficult first marriage, a move across 3 states, rebuilding slowly. She deserved something good. I told myself that when she introduced him to me 8 months later over dinner at a restaurant she'd chosen because she knew I liked the salmon there. He shook my hand firmly, smiled, said all the right things, called me sir twice. I liked him that night. I want to be honest about that. My wife had passed 4 years before. Pancreatic cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the end, my daughter had driven down every other weekend during that time, stayed with us, cooked, helped with medications. She was the kind of woman her mother raised her to be. So when she finally found someone she was happy with, I wasn't going to stand in the way of that. They got married on a Saturday in October. Small ceremony. 40 people. I paid for the venue and the catering because they asked and because I could. My pension from 31 years with the county was solid. I had the house paid off. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable, and my daughter was my only child. He moved into her apartment at first. Then, about 8 months in, they said they wanted something bigger, more space. They'd found a house they loved in a neighborhood 20 minutes from me. The numbers were tight, though. The down payment was a stretch. I offered to help. $22,000. A gift, not a loan. I said that clearly, and I meant it. I didn't want anything between us to feel like debt. What I didn't expect was how quickly help became expected. It started small. The way it always does. 6 months after they moved in, the water heater went. My son-in-law mentioned it at Sunday dinner. Not quite asking, just mentioning. Describing the quote he'd gotten. Shaking his head at the number. I offered to split it with them. He nodded like that was the natural outcome of the conversation. Then the car. His transmission. He drove a truck he'd bought before the marriage, and the repair estimate was more than the truck was worth. He found a used replacement, needed help with the gap. I wrote a check. I want to be fair. My daughter always thanked me. She always hugged me, looked me in the eye, said she didn't know what they'd do without me. And I believed her. I just didn't think hard enough about the fact that she was thanking me for both of them. Because he never once said thank you. Not once. Not a real one. I noticed it. I told myself it was just his personality. Some people aren't expressive. Some men from certain backgrounds don't find that kind of thing easy. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, the way you do when you're trying to keep peace inside your own family. But there's a difference between someone who struggles to express gratitude and someone who genuinely doesn't feel it. I learned that difference over about 4 years. He worked in sales, had since his mid-20s, but the income was inconsistent. Good months, bad months. My daughter worked full-time as a medical billing coordinator, steady, reliable, not high-paying. Together they got by, but just barely. And whenever there was a gap, there I was. Property taxes came due the year the basement flooded. I covered it. They wanted to take a vacation to celebrate their 3rd anniversary. Costa Rica. I didn't hear about it until they were already back. But when their credit card bill came the following month and he said, offhand, that they'd gotten a little overextended, I helped them pay it down. I started keeping a rough number in my head. Not because I was bitter. Just because the number kept growing and I needed to understand what I was looking at. By the time everything happened, it was somewhere around $60,000 over 4 years. Not counting the original down payment. I told myself it was fine. It was helping my daughter. It was what fathers do. But somewhere in there something shifted in how he talked to me. Not dramatic. Not anything I could point to clearly in the beginning. Just a slow erosion of something. A little less warmth, a little more entitlement in how he framed things. He started making small comments about my age. Gentle digs, the kind that sound like jokes until you've heard them enough times. He called me the old man once when he thought I was in the other room. I heard it. I didn't say anything. He questioned my opinions at the dinner table, not in a curious way, in a dismissive way. Cut me off. Redirected conversations. Once, when I made a suggestion about the backyard garden my daughter wanted to put in, he laughed and said, "Yeah, we'll look into that," in a tone that meant we would. And also, "Why are you even talking?" I kept going over for Sunday dinners because my daughter wanted me there, because the food was good and she always made the pot roast I loved, because being in that house with her laughing in the kitchen was the closest thing I had to what my life used to feel like. So I swallowed things, small things, week after week. And then came the night of the July 4th barbecue. My daughter had invited a few couples from the neighborhood, her friend from work, my son-in-law's 2 brothers. It was a warm evening. The yard looked good. There was music playing low from the outdoor speakers. I was standing near the grill talking to one of the neighbors when I heard him, across the yard, holding court with his brothers. I wasn't meant to hear it. Or maybe he didn't care. He was talking about the house, about the improvements they wanted to make, a finished basement, updated kitchen cabinets, maybe a deck extension. And then one of his brothers asked, laughing a little, "Who's funding all this?" He glanced across the yard, in my direction. "My father-in-law," he said. "He doesn't have much else to spend it on." He said it the way you talk about a utility, a resource, something that existed to be used. I stood very still. The neighbor kept talking. I nodded at whatever he was saying. I don't remember a single word of it. I drove home that night without saying goodbye. I told my daughter the next day that I'd had a headache coming on. She believed me. But I sat with what I'd heard for 3 weeks. Turned it over. Let it settle. Asked myself whether I'd misunderstood, whether I was being too sensitive, whether the alcohol and the loud evening had distorted something. I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. What I didn't know yet was that it was going to get worse before I did anything about it. 2 months after the barbecue, my daughter called me on a Thursday night sounding strained. She said they were going through a harder stretch financially. Her hours had been cut slightly. His commissions were down. They needed help with the mortgage payment for September. "Just this once," she said. I said yes. I always said yes. I wrote the check and dropped it off on a Saturday morning. My son-in-law was home. He answered the door, took the envelope, glanced inside, nodded. "Good," he said. "Not thank you. Not I really appreciate this. Good." Like I'd completed a task correctly. I drove home. I sat in my driveway for about 10 minutes before I went inside. I didn't go back for 3 Sundays. My daughter called the second week, asked if I was okay. I said I'd been dealing with my knee. She offered to come by. I told her I was fine. The third week, she called again and asked directly, "Did something happen with him?" I told her we'd talk soon. I wasn't ready. What I was doing quietly over those 3 weeks was something I'd never done before. I was getting organized. I called my attorney, a woman I'd worked with when I handled my wife's estate. I didn't tell her everything, just that I wanted to review some things. My will. The beneficiary structure on my accounts. A couple of financial arrangements I'd been meaning to revisit. I wasn't angry when I sat in her office. I was clear. Clearer than I'd felt in years. I also called my financial advisor. There was a small savings account I'd set up a couple of years back, originally meant as a general family fund, a cushion I could draw from if my daughter needed help. I had him separate it, move it back under my name only, restructure how it was labeled. I didn't tell anyone I'd done this. And then, in early November, everything came to a head. My daughter's birthday was on a Saturday. She'd mentioned wanting to do something simple, just dinner, maybe her 2 closest friends and me. I'd been planning to take everyone to a restaurant she loved, a nice Italian place about 15 minutes away. I'd already made the reservation. Friday evening, I drove over to drop off a card and a small gift, a bracelet she'd admired months ago that I'd quietly tracked down. I let myself in through the side door, the way I always did. They knew I was coming. My son-in-law was in the kitchen. My daughter was upstairs. He was on the phone. He didn't lower his voice when he saw me. He barely glanced up. I set the gift on the counter and started to move toward the hallway to call up to my daughter. And then I heard him, phone still to his ear, say to whoever was on the other end, "Yeah, he'll be there tomorrow. Can't exactly avoid it. Honestly, I'm counting down the days until he stops making himself so available." He said it like I wasn't standing 8 feet away. Or maybe he knew I was and had stopped caring. I didn't move for a moment. He finished his call, set the phone down, looked at me without any particular expression. "She's upstairs," he said. "I heard you," I said. He didn't flinch. He shrugged one shoulder. "It's been a long week." That was it. That was his explanation. "Long week," I nodded. I said, "Tell her I stopped by." I picked the gift back up off the counter, and I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I got in my car, drove home, and sat in my living room in the dark for a long time. I thought about my wife, about what she would have said if she'd been there. She was a practical woman. A kind woman, but practical. She would have said, "You already know what you need to do. Stop stalling." She was right. She was always right. Saturday morning, I called the restaurant and cancelled the reservation. Then I called my daughter's friend, the one she'd wanted to invite, and said something had come up, that my daughter would be in touch. I sent my daughter a text that said I wasn't feeling well, and I was sorry about dinner. She called immediately. I let it go to voicemail. She left one saying she was worried, that this wasn't like me, that she hoped I was okay. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove 40 minutes north to a small inn. I'd stayed at once before, years back after a fishing weekend. I knew they had a good room with a porch that looked over a pond. I booked 2 nights. I packed a bag. I left one thing on my kitchen table before I went. Not a note. Exactly. More of a document. A summary, printed, 2 pages, of every financial transfer I'd made to them over the past 4 years. Dates, amounts, purposes. $61,400. With a short line at the top that said, "I've been glad to help." That chapter is now closed. No dramatics, just the facts. I drove north. The first night I sat on the porch for almost 2 hours with a glass of bourbon and didn't think about very much. The second morning I took a long walk around the pond. I had coffee at a little diner in town. I read a novel I'd been meaning to start since the spring. By Sunday afternoon I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Still, not happy, not resolved, just still. The way things feel when you finally stop fighting the current. My daughter called 8 times over Saturday and Sunday. My son-in-law did not call once. I noted that. Sunday evening I called her back. She was upset, somewhere between worried and hurt. She'd gone to my house Saturday when I didn't respond. Had my neighbor let her in to check on me. Found the house empty and the document on the table. "I don't understand," she said. Her voice was tight. "Why didn't you just talk to me?" "I'm talking to you now," I said. "You listed out all that money like it was some kind of accusation." "It's not an accusation," I said. "It's a record." "There's a difference." Silence. "What do you want, Dad?" I thought about it. "I want to know that you understand what I heard him say Friday night." More silence. Then, quietly, he told me. He said you misunderstood. "I was 8 feet away, sweetheart." She didn't say anything. "I've been patient," I said. "I've given money because I love you, and because I wanted your life to be easier. But I've watched your husband treat me like a wallet with legs for 4 years, and Friday was the last time I'm going to stand in someone's kitchen and feel like an inconvenience in my own daughter's house." I heard her exhale. "He's not perfect," she said finally. "I know that. I know you know it. But he's my husband." "I know that too," I said. "And I'm your father. And those two things are supposed to be able to coexist. We talked for almost an hour. Not resolution. Not yet. But real talking. The kind we hadn't done in a while, she cried at one point. I let her. I didn't try to fix it. Before we hung up, she said, "Are you coming home?" "I'm driving back tomorrow morning," I said. "But I need you to hear me clearly. I'm not coming back to Sunday dinners where I feel like I'm being tolerated. I'm not writing another check, and if you want me in your life, and I want to be in your life more than anything, then we need to have a real conversation, the three of us, about what respect actually looks like." She said she understood. I believed her mostly. Whether she could make him understand was a different question, and I knew it. I drove home Monday morning. The document was gone from the table. She'd taken it. My coffee maker was exactly where I'd left it. The house was quiet. I made a fresh pot, sat at the table, and looked out the window at the yard. The leaves were down. The yard looked bare and a little tired. I'd been meaning to have someone come out in spring to look at the maple on the left side. One of the bigger branches was starting to look stressed. I made a list. Small things I'd been putting off. Oil change. Dentist appointment. That branch. Cleaning out the hall closet. My life. The parts of it that were just mine. A few weeks later, my daughter came over alone on a Sunday. She brought soup. We sat at the kitchen table and talked for 3 hours. She admitted she had looked the other way too often. But she had let herself believe the tension was just personality difference, just men being men. She cried again. So did I. Once. She said she had talked to him, that it had been a hard conversation, that he had pushed back, gotten defensive, said I was too sensitive, but that she had not let it go this time. I told him, she said, that if you stop coming around, I lose my father, and that's not something I'm willing to trade for keeping the peace. I looked at my daughter across the table, 63 years old, sitting in the house her mother had loved, and I thought about all the years that had led to this exact moment. "That's enough," I said. "For now, that's enough." We didn't have a fairy tale ending. I'm not going to tell you we did. He and I have not had a conversation since November that lasted more than 5 minutes. I don't know if that changes. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But I started sleeping better. That first, and then other things followed. I called an old friend I'd drifted from, and we made plans to go fishing in the spring. I signed up for a woodworking class at the community center, something I'd always said I'd do someday. I had my lawyer finalize some adjustments to my estate documents that I should have made years ago. I stopped measuring my worth by how much I was needed. That's the part that took longest to understand. I had confused being useful with being loved. I had written check after check and shown up Sunday after Sunday thinking that was what kept the door open. But the door was never locked. It was my own door. I just kept standing outside it. My wife had this saying she used when people stayed in situations longer than they should. She'd shake her head and say, "Some lessons you have to learn at full price." I paid full price on this one, but I paid it. And now the ledger is closed, and what's left is mine. That turned out to be more than I expected. I keep thinking about that drive home from my daughter's house in November. 8 minutes. I've made it hundreds of times. But that night I pulled into my driveway and sat in the dark for a while before I went inside, and I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I thought I'd be angry. Instead, I just felt very tired, and underneath that, something quieter, something that felt almost like clarity. My son-in-law didn't say anything cruel because he was a cruel person. He said it because he'd stopped seeing me as a person at all. That's what happens when someone goes unchallenged long enough. The disrespect doesn't always start loud. It starts when you let the first small thing pass, and then the second, and then the third, until one day you're standing in a kitchen holding a birthday gift for your daughter, and someone is talking about you like you're a line item in a budget. That didn't happen to me overnight, and if I'm being honest with myself, really honest, I helped build the conditions for it. Every check I wrote without a conversation. Every Sunday I swallowed something and drove home and said nothing. I thought I was being the bigger person. I was just being absent from my own life. What I had to reckon with sitting at that kitchen table the morning I made my decision was this. I had confused generosity with worth. I gave because I believed that giving was how I stayed connected to my daughter, how I stayed needed, how I stayed relevant in a life that had moved forward without her mother in it. That's not generosity. That's fear wearing the clothes of generosity, and fear will drain you of everything. Your money, yes, but more than that. Your clarity, your sense of what you actually deserve. The document I left on the table wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of honesty. With him, with my daughter, and mostly with myself. $61,000 laid out in rows and dates is not a weapon. It's a mirror. I needed to see it as clearly as they did. What got me through those weeks wasn't certainty that things would get better. I didn't know they would. What got me through was a decision to stop outsourcing my sense of dignity to people who had shown me, repeatedly, that they weren't going to protect it. That takes something. It takes the willingness to see a situation as it actually is, not as you wish it were. And then it takes the harder thing, actually moving, not talking about moving, not planning to move, moving. My wife used to say that character isn't what you do when things are easy. It's what you do in the long, unglamorous middle. The part where nobody's watching. And the right thing is also the harder thing. And there's no guarantee it pays off. I think about that a lot now. About the long, unglamorous middle. I'm in it still. My daughter and I are rebuilding something real slowly. My son-in-law and I exist in the same rooms on holidays and say enough to get through. Maybe that changes. Maybe it doesn't. What I know is that I stopped waiting for his behavior to determine how I felt about myself. That's not a small thing. For me, at 63, it was just about everything. The ledger is closed. What's left is mine. And it turns out that's more than enough to build something with.